Today we are going to be taking notes on writing equivalent expressions combining like terms. To start, let's write your name, date, and section in your yellow page. The terms that connect to this lesson are variable, term, combining like terms. So a variable is a symbol or a letter that represents one or more numbers. A term is either a single number or a variable or a number and variables multiplied together. Terms are separated by plus or minus sign. And lastly, combining like terms, that means adding or subtracting terms that have the same variable or constant. So remember, combining like terms are when you're adding or subtracting terms that have the same variable or they don't have a variable at all, which makes them constants. Now let's write a quick example of the variables. We have usually what we use, x and y. When we're talking about term, I'm going to write two terms. So I'm going to write x plus 2. X is one term and 2 is the second term. And when you are combining like terms, that is when you add x plus 2x, and that gives you 3x. Now, let's go to the problem. It says, write an equivalent expression by combining like terms for the following expression. So we have 3x plus 5x plus 6 minus 2x minus 3. The first thing we need to do is highlight the important information. The information that we need to highlight is we are writing an equivalent expression, so we know that our expression is going to be equivalent. Then we are also going to highlight combining like terms. That is what the problem is asking us to do. Now I'm going to rewrite the expression. So I get 3x plus 5x plus 6 minus 2x minus 3. My next step will be to do two strokes for all my minus signs. So where it says minus 2x, I'm going to do two strokes, 1, 2, and then negative 3, I'm going to do two strokes, 1, 2. Now you could read this as 3x plus 5x plus 6 plus negative 2x plus negative 3. Here's when you're going to be using the different properties. In this case, as you can tell, I can quickly group 3x plus 5x, but then I have another term that has an x. So now let's rewrite this and let's highlight all the variables. Our first term has a variable. Our second term has a variable. Our third term doesn't have a variable. And our fourth term does have a variable. Now we're going to use the properties to regroup and also rearrange our elements. We are going to start by using the community property to rearrange the terms. That means I'm going to move them around. I need to put all my variables in one side and all my constants in the other. So every single term that has a variable that we highlighted earlier, we're going to put it on the left. And we get 3x plus 5x plus negative 2x plus 6 plus 3. Now for our sixth step, we are actually going to regroup things. So I'm going to add parentheses to the terms that have the same variable. So I'm going to use the associative property to regroup the terms. So I'm going to add a parenthesis in front of 3x and then after negative 2x, and then another one in front of the 6 and behind the 3. Our seventh step will be to combine like terms. So we're going to add the terms that have the same variables together and the ones that don't have a variable together. We are going to start from left to right. 3x plus 5x, we are going to add the coefficient, that means the number in front of the variable. So 3 plus 5 gives us 8x plus negative 2x plus we have 6 plus 3, so we have 9. Once again, from left to right, we have 8x plus negative 2x. Now we know they are in different teams. One is a positive, one is a negative, so we need to subtract 8 minus 2. That gives us 6x. We can remove the parentheses, plus 9. Now, that is our equivalent expression, 6x plus. Now, we got our equivalent expression, and this is called standard form. Our equivalent expression, it is in standard form, which means it's the simplest form possible. Our last step will be to box our answer. Using the first part of the video, you should be able to do this yellow page independently. Now we're going to be writing equivalent expressions, but using the distributive property. The words associated with this concept are variable. A variable is a symbol or a letter that represents one or more numbers. A term is either a single number or variable, or numbers and variables multiplied together. Terms are separated by addition or subtraction sign. Distributive property is when you multiply the factor on the outside of the parentheses with each term inside the parentheses. Make sure that you have these words down in your yellow page. Now the instructions are: write an equivalent expression by applying the distributive property. That means that you are going to be using the distributive property. We need to highlight equivalent expression and distributive property. My next step will be to rewrite the expression. Now I want you to highlight the factor. Okay, the factor is going to be our 3 that is outside. That is our factor, and we need to multiply by every single term inside the parentheses. Now I'm going to use the distributive property to expand the expression. So I'm going to multiply 3 times 2x. So 3 times 2x and 3 times 6. But you see how we have a negative sign right here? So I'm multiplying 3 times, and let's think about the whole term. We have a negative and a positive will give me a negative. So I have negative 3 times 6. This is very basic. 3 times 2 gives me 6. And we keep the variable. And now we have minus 3 times 6, which is 18. Now you have the first term that has a variable, and the second term doesn't have a variable, so I cannot combine them. Now the only thing we need to do is box our answer. Now use your notes and also the video to do this independent practice. Now, following the same idea, we're going to be writing equivalent expressions by factoring. Okay, the terms that you need to know are variable. A variable is a symbol or a letter that represents one or more numbers. GCF, that stands for greatest common factor, the greatest number that divides exactly into two or more numbers. And a factor is a whole number that divides exactly into another number. Now, we are going to be writing an equivalent expression as a product of two factors. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is highlight the key information. We are going to highlight equivalent expression and the product of two factors. To be able to do that, we need to find the GCF, the greatest common factor between both terms. To do that, I'm going to list all the factors. I'm going to list all the factors vertically. So I'm going to start with 6. All the factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. Now I'm going to list all the factors of 15, x. Now I'm going to start with my variable, which is x. And then I have 1, 3, 5, 15. Now you need to look for the factor that they have in common. One has a variable, the other one doesn't, so it cannot be a variable. We have 3 and 3. That is the greatest common factor. So we can actually rewrite this expression as a product of two factors now. We are going to rewrite each term as a product. That means that we know that 6 is the same thing as saying 3 times 2. Okay? And 15x is the same thing as saying 3 times 5x. Now we wrote it like this because 3 is the greatest common factor. Now we're going to use the distributive property to factor out the greatest common factor. We actually did that during quarter 3. So I'm going to rewrite it as 3 times 2 plus 3 times 5x. So I'm going to add parentheses. And I'm going to take out the greatest common factor. Now that gives me 3 times parentheses 2 plus 5x. Now we are writing this as a product of two factors. Now let's box our answer.